Well, hello, Wendy. How are you?
I'm terrific. Thank you. How are you, Myrna?
Oh, I'm so looking forward to this conversation with you because I think so many people are in the exact right place to hear what you do. And so,
Mm.
every once in a while you come across someone, you're like, that's a thing. How do I tell everyone about it?
I
So,
I appreciate that.
the idea that you can kind of unretire or, our platform is a life design. So more like design that chapter of your life instead
Yes.
of maybe what you were thinking of, well, I'll sit on a rocking chair, I'll play a lot of golf. We'll take that worldwide trip we've been talking about on the big cruise ship. When you and I first met, we were talking about I've met people who've done that. They checked off their bucket list and they're going to live another 20 years. What do we do now? Like I
Yes.
want to
Yeah.
watch TV for the next 20 years, but I don't want to kill myself either. So how perfect is it that you have a way for people to really successfully navigate this chapter of their lives? I know as someone who some of my older family is still alive, I've just helped my mom come into an assisted living
Mm.
facility. And so we want to make sure they get in their fun, safely, and they feel like they led productive lives for the whole of their life
Yes.
without the metronome of going to work and getting a paycheck, going to work. And, at some point that gets shut off. But they still want to have meaningful lives and do things that are fun and to have you open up the possibility of what those things could be. I want to hear all about it. So,
Oh,
how did you get
fantastic.
into this, Wendy?
Well, I've always been a coach in some way through my career. Sales leadership was always my focus. So I worked
Okay.
for a lot of different size companies with a lot of different products from Fortune 50 to franchise to fashion.
Oh,
And
fun.
always just loved the process, loved being able to take something from the beginning and see it through to the end, being able to really meet and achieve and exceed those sales and service numbers
Mhm.
and connect with clients and elevate my team members. So just this wonderful
Mhm.
combination of things.
Mhm.
But I did hit a juncture, and maybe you and your listeners have felt this way too, where it, the last position I was in, it wasn't really clicking with who I was, what
Yes.
felt really meaningful to me. And I think as we age, we start to gain that wisdom.
You
Arthur
learn a few
Brooks
things
talks
along
about,
the way.
yeah, we sure do. Yeah. And so there's that concept of moving from this fluid intelligence where we're achieving and we're striving and we're really externally focused to this crystallized intelligence where the wisdom and the knowledge that we want to impart with others. And I started getting a lot more clear about, what internally is important to me. And so I went on a journey of looking at, well, I like to bring myself forward. I love all the things I just shared with you. I discovered coaching. So I went back to school, and that I want to really underscore that, I did that later on in life. And yeah, it was challenging. And yeah, it kind of got me out of my comfort zone. But we know that when we're in a little discomfort, that's when the learning takes place and the growth takes place. So, all that being said, I then went into business coaching initially because that's, what my background was in, but very quickly started to feel for me that it was a little more transactional, the strategies and how to
Nuts and
make
bolts.
numbers.
Mhm.
Yes. As opposed to the transformational piece. And at the same time, Myrna, I started noticing that a lot of my peer group, as well as a lot of my clients, were really struggling as they were preparing for retirement or experiencing it. And so I went on a search for like what can I do to assist them, and I found books, started reading up, and then I found out, oh my goodness, there are credentials in this. There's actually something non-financial
Mhm.
around the support of the retirement journey. And so I went back and got two additional credentials in retirement life planning. I'm part of the Retirement Coaches Association. And that's where my heart is, because I really did see that struggle. And I think for so many of us, we think that, wow, retirement is it. You've really made
Yes.
it. The
I'm
goal.
finally on permanent vacation.
Yes, yeah. And like you said before, yeah, but that gets old. If we knew that it was endless weekends forever, they would kind of lose a little of their shine. And so we bring our whole selves into retirement, not just our investment portfolios. And yet so much of the focus is having the financial house in order. There's so much more. So I'd love to dig into that with you, but that's the work that I do.
Yeah, no, that's very exciting. And I notice as you describe in your own career that sort of your last stop on the regular 9 to 5 job train, you're like, yeah, this is it's the nuts and the bolts. And did you meet your quota? Good for you. But it didn't have the juice that it used to have because you're different over the period of time. It's not
Yes.
that the role isn't valuable or the work isn't useful or that you're earning your money. You're different, you've changed. And so I wonder if a part of your process is having the person reflect on, I know who I was at 25 when I decided to be an electrical engineer or a lawyer or a plastic surgeon or whatever kind of thing choices you made. And in the meantime, we had a family and we lived in 3 different states and we've done this and we've done that. Who am I today? Is that part of your exploration so that you could match how they might engage their time and their effort in a way that's fulfilling for them? Because I think like doing a lot of travel is like having ice cream for breakfast every day. After a while, you're not really looking forward to it because you get it all the time,
Yes.
so there's only so much of a really special thing and it stops being really special. So what do we do in between the trips so that we like how we spend our time?
Yeah, I think you bring up that vitally important point that what are we going to bring with us into retirement? And also, what are we going to leave behind? So I do work with clients a lot about what does feel meaningful to you. And, that question of finding purpose, it's just like, oh my gosh, that's the holy grail. It's like looms so large and people, it can be a non-starter and people
Yes.
can feel stuck or they can feel like, wow, I missed out on all that information. Everybody else got the memo and I didn't. So that's an area that we really look at too, is that it's not about finding purpose, that one thing. It's feeling purposeful. It's an action, it's a verb. And so how each day can we kind of pepper in a little bit of that feeling purposeful? And can it be a purpose with a small p instead of a capital P? Um, can we find it in lots of different ways and recognize that it's ever changing? And so, yes, we go in and look at, when I was young, what really lit me up? And if it didn't really matter, what would I be doing?
Right,
And
if you didn't have to do it for money and you don't
yes,
have a toddler on your hip and you don't have, you're in a time of your life where you could actually make the world your oyster. What do you remember loving to do? And I also wonder too that there are people who have really loved doing a thing, have done it successfully, don't want to do that anymore. But how do you go back and dig up the components? Like, do you take people through assessments or you mentioned a workbook. Tell us about that. How do people kind of get oriented to begin this process?
yeah, well, you mentioned several things there. So there is a lot of work done around what makes us feel fulfilled, and fosters that sense of well-being.
Mhm.
That when we really key in on that with work, and then we look at, okay, what can we translate and transfer and bring with us into retirement? And again, as I mentioned, what do we leave behind? So Martin Seligman, known as the father of positive psychology, has this concept called PERMA. And that's an exercise I go through with my clients as well. And PERMA stands for positive engagement and positive emotion and engagement and relationships, meaning as well as achievement. And so we can really do a deep dive and see how did we feel that sense of perma in our work. And then what of those things might we want to bring into retirement? So, yes,
Translate.
maybe someone was a teacher, and so loves being able to elevate people's capabilities or make something complex simple or
Mhm.
connect with people on that level. Maybe not going into volunteering teaching, but how might they be on a board that helps with a group, an organization that needs that kind of insight, or one of my clients who had been in academia ended up going into the prisons and being able to work with the inmates there and open up some of those pathways for them about connection and learning and things. So I think, when we heard about that unretirement for a bit and so many people were going back to work, yes, there was potentially a financial component for some, but I think for others, like you said, too much ice cream, and now all of a sudden you got a tummy ache, and this isn't what I had in mind.
Mhm.
And that I felt, from my vantage point, was such a travesty for people to just say, you know what, I'd rather be back at work. If they had that vision for themselves in retirement, that life by design that you talk about, and I do as well, then what was missing there? What else was needed to support them to
Mhm.
continue on that path? And I think oftentimes it's because there isn't that vision to begin with. There
Mhm.
isn't that recognition that this is going to unfold and I'm going
Yeah.
to pivot and look at possibilities.
Yeah.
But instead being so attached to that bucket list and the to-do list and then feeling let down.
I'm thinking about the question that people get, okay, so you're going to retire at the end of the year. So there's this public persona, your reputation, your identity. Well, you've powerfully been a decision maker, or you've been the owner of a business, or whatever that looks like. And that's kind of your public identity. And
Yes,
how do you translate that into retirement? Are you being sent out to pasture because you don't have value anymore? And I think some people resist retirement because they don't have an answer to the question of, well, what else would I do?
yes,
So they just keep extending what
yes,
they're doing, or well, I'll consult and do it. Like that's so different from owning a company and then consulting other people that own companies. And while that might be the next step, you know, so I'm not going to work 60 hours a week. I'm going to work 10 hours a week. I'm going to be a fractional consultant, and I'll see if I want to help lead other people through things I've already led my company through. Um, to be able to tell people I'm working with a retirement coach. I'm exploring all the avenues of how does my time and talent translate, and what do I like doing? Because
yes,
I haven't had time to golf in the last 3 months. I know I like golf, but I
yes,
haven't had time to do these other things because we did the merger and then we did their life
yeah.
is busy and full, so they haven't had free time to
Yeah, and
explore
finding that
other things.
balance. Yeah,
Yeah.
because we think about if a full-time job is 8, 10, 12, 14 more hours of a day, and oh
Yeah.
yeah, we need to sleep. What hours do we have left? And so now we've got this really unique opportunity to
Mhm.
regain or restore some of that balance. And this is where a lot of times when I work with clients, they have this really strong recognition that, oh my goodness, I really was short shrifting these important relationships or my health. But can't we do that before we move into retirement? Have what I call a runway to retirement and do that little step by step? Because we know if we try to take that big leap, it can really become overwhelming or again a
Yes.
non-starter. So let's just take it one step at a time. But you brought up, gosh, the sense of identity. There's a saying, if you are what you do, who are you when you don't? And
Yes.
so our careers and ourselves can become so intertwined. And we want to kind of unravel that a little bit, not so that we feel unraveled, but so that we recognize that who we are and who we've always been is still there. And so let's really give some of that space and grace and allow ourselves to go inward, not just look at that change of roles from career to retiree, but instead look at that internal transition.
Mhm.
William Bridges is prolific in his work around transitions and speaks to this idea that it's a continuum that we start with the ending.
Yeah.
And then we move into this time of reflection. He calls it the
Okay.
neutral zone before we go into the new beginning. But so many people, Myrna, jump right into that new beginning. They do the to-do list, the bucket list. They fill up their dance cards. I have some coming to me that say, wow, retirement isn't cracked up what I thought it would be because I'm exhausted and I might as well go back to work and get paid for it.
Mhm.
We really deconstruct that then and say, well, what are the piece parts? Why are those things on your dance card? And
Mhm.
it does get down to that sense of ideal identity and oftentimes feeling like, oh, I still want to be relevant. I still
Yeah.
want to be able to say to people, I'm doing all these
I want
things.
to be
And yet
respected.
it's not,
I want to
yeah,
be moving the needle. I want to be making a difference. And, I think too, for people who, especially go-getters, people in leadership and management who are strategic planning and, they're making the big ships turn, right? The
yes,
idea that, well, I'm going to learn to cook Italian food and I'm going to take up painting. it feels like it's not important enough to spend your time on it or valuable enough. And if you don't even know if you like it. So how would you get people to try on different things because they might fall in love with writing poetry or
Yes.
opera or something? And but they haven't had a minute to spare to even explore what those things might be. So
Yeah.
I
So
know we're
that
going to put
is,
a link to a workbook, but I know you must have a process to walk people through. Let's discover what you do like, because it sounds like you might have forgot, what you
yeah.
have to do
You
besides
know,
work.
yes, where I really start with people is their mindset, their
Mhm,
perspective,
mhm.
because oftentimes when we look at retiring, we equate it with aging.
Yes.
We equate it with loss. So now you and I are speaking about identity and that potential loss of identity. There's
Mhm.
that loss of connection with all the people that you worked with or that you would speak to on a daily basis. There
Yes.
can be, this feeling that as I age, then my health isn't the same, or how I'm feeling about how I'm looking. So there can be a lot of loss attached with it. And so we start with mindset and start with that perspective. Are
Mhm,
we coming from that half empty or half full glass? What can we do to fill up that glass?
mhm,
So, and what's getting in the way? Because I mentioned to you briefly before we started chatting that I'm part of a Retirement Coaches Association, and a number of us coaches got together and put together a book called the Retirement Collective.
okay.
And my chapter in the book is called Uncovering Hidden Thoughts and Feelings.
Mhm,
Because this is such a critical spot where so many that are in the retirement age, that typical 62, 65, weren't raised with positive psychology. We were the no pain, no gain, get it done, push through. And
mhm,
if you've got these difficult emotions coming up, you push them aside because they're inefficient, or
mhm,
you push them down because they're getting in the way of things.
mhm,
Yet we know that our emotions are signals that
mhm.
something needs more attention.
Attention.
And if we don't give it the attention,
Mhm.
then those emotions can then really disrupt our thoughts, our beliefs, our actions. They can really get in the way. So
They
we
have a
really,
knock-on effect in your life that by the time you get to the fourth ripple out or the fifth ripple out, you're like, why is this happening? And then you have to back to the source of what it was. Yeah.
yes, yeah. So I've got some really effective tools around building our mental fitness, and
Mhm,
that we start with that. We think about physical fitness and the external, but
mhm,
we know that research tells us that we can impact the neural pathways in our brains now.
mhm.
The more that we think about positive things, not from toxic positivity, but the more that we really focus on quieting that survivor brain that's there to protect us, but really is no longer relevant. We're not out in the jungle with
We're not in Maslow's
tigers.
hierarchy at those lower rungs anymore. Well,
Yeah,
and I think giving people permission to take a fresh look at their identity, because so much of that is just layered on like paint over time. I'm the
mm,
person that started this company, and I'm the person that grew it, and I'm the person that did the merger, and I'm the person that did, and it takes up your time and your effort until you don't realize that 70% of who you are, whether it's how you perceive it or other people perceive it, is the work you've been doing, as you talk about.
yes,
And
yes,
so you have to find out who you are first to decide then how you're going to show up in the world with other people where they see you are fulfilled and you are happy. You're finding that small p purpose day to day, and you're
yes,
rocking retirement.
yes,
There's a way to
yeah,
do that, but this runway concept, I think, is important because you have to think, well, I'm not being sent out to pasture. It's not that I'm not valuable. I'm choosing to have more available time to explore things I simply haven't had the time to do because I was
right.
running a company, starting a business, training emerging leaders, whatever that was. But now I'm going to make the time and find out things that I love to do. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. So
so,
we really start with the why
yeah.
rather than the what. And so when you're sharing, poetry or painting or things
Mhm.
like, if we really start with the why, what does light you up? What is but the attachment to the meaning behind it. So like for one of my clients, she really wanted to write a song and produce it for her children. that
Oh.
became a really strong why for her. But it wasn't just attached to the what, oh, I'm going to write a song. It was, this is what I want to give to
The
them.
meaning. Hmm.
Yeah, a meaning behind it. And for others, it's like one of my clients decided to go work at Disneyland because he just felt like being able to be not just in an environment that's so happy, but also being able to be a part of that and an agent of that really lit him up. So was it that, oh, I want to go get a job? No, it started with that why, that feeling of meaning. And so really as a coach, our job is to help with that exploration, to be there to give those pathways, but not the answers. So it's not a matter that people come to me and I have a checklist. Oh, you could go volunteer here, you could go do this hobby there. No, we start with really how are we feeling about things? What's our view on retirement? How are we feeling about what we want to bring with us, what we need to leave behind, and then allow it to unfold and look at what our value set, because we know that when our actions are aligned with our values, we stay motivated and committed. So we dig deep, but it is that notion of needing to dig deep. And that's not for everyone. I recognize that.
Right.
But if you are wanting something that feels more fulfilling, more aligned
Mhm.
with who you are, if you want that assistance in developing that vision, because we know that without the destination, how are we going to move in a direction? It
Mhm.
doesn't mean we have to stay, go from A to B,
Mhm.
but it does mean that at least we know how we want to take those small steps and move forward. So that little mini workbook that I'd love to offer to your listeners does allow for some of this reflection time. It does have exercises. I
Mhm.
kind of came up with this acronym of taking aim around your planning. So heightening your awareness,
Oh, wonderful.
setting your intention, and
Mhm.
then moving into action. And so
It,
taking aim.
yeah, it feels like if you went through the workbook process, you might think, well, I've always wanted to go to Italy. And I like Italian opera and I like Italian food. So I wonder in my last year before I step away from this company that I add in more Italian opera and Italian food and plan a trip to Italy. So, how can I take bite-sized portions on my runway
Yes.
of seeing, is this really, helping me feel alive again? And go, wow, this is it. Or like, nah.
Yeah,
I've
so
been
it is.
thinking that, but that's not it. So
It
I
is
have
that
time.
experimentation. Yeah, it is that experimentation, and it's that willingness to just take that small step because so often people, when they retire, then they go full on into volunteering or full on into taking care of grandkids or full on to starting a business.
Mhm.
And no judgment there, and if that works for you, but oftentimes we can go all in and
Mhm.
then we can't get all out. And we want to be able, like you said earlier, to stay true to ourselves and find really what lights us up. We have this unique opportunity to do it. And I think a very healthy way to do that is just to take it one step. So interesting you mentioned Italy, because one of my clients, that's what he wants to do when he retires. And so we kind of reversed engineered it and said, okay, you're going to retire. You're projecting to retire here. You're wanting to move to Italy. So what can you do to support that and allow yourself to get a feel? So he's going to go for a month. He
Gonna
has
get
that.
his feet wet.
Yeah, and see what he thinks and then kind of go from there. I've had clients too that have come to me and said, I'm planning to retire. One of them 5 years out, but she was planful and wanted to work together.
Mhm.
In our work together, she's gotten so excited about now that vision that she's going to retire earlier.
She's moving it up.
She's
Mhm.
moving it up because she's got that runway. She's got that clarity of what what she's retiring to and what she can bring with her. On the opposite side, I had a client come to me. This doesn't happen too often, who wanted to map out her retirement, was planning to retire in a couple of years. And as we started working together, it became very clear that she wasn't retiring on her terms. She was retiring because her family members had put so much pressure on her. They had all retired early and they just said, you need to do this
This
too. But yet,
identity component.
yeah, she took that agency She took that accountability for her choices, and we dug in, and she felt very gratified with her work. They loved her. She liked the financial remuneration.
Mhm.
She felt that she had balance. She was seeing family as much as she wanted to.
Yes,
Maybe they felt differently, but
yes,
in any event, so I think that that was really a pivotal thing for her as well. So the key here
yes,
is a retirement by design, not default. And the
yes.
key here is being the CEO of you, that you now have this opportunity to lead yourself in
Mhm.
this next chapter that you may or may not have had in your career. But
Right.
that ownership is on you and that accountability. So make the choices then that really align with all the things we've talked about.
I've been paying attention to people that decide to live overseas. My son's a digital nomad and he's on his fourth country. He's super loving Vietnam, but he runs into expats that have retired. They've retired in Thailand or they've retired in, India, Sri Lanka, now Vietnam. And some of them feel like they didn't do their planning well, so they don't have a way to go back. I've read a couple of accounts of people who retired to Costa Rica, and there's this some sort of rule of thumb, like the 4-year mark or the 5-year mark, where some people pick up stakes and go home. They
Mm.
go home. And so they've had enough of being an expat overseas. So do
Yes.
you work with people who say, okay, I made my plans. I thought I knew what I wanted. And 3 years in, not so much now. To who sort of pivot? Do they work with you to pivot? I've had enough fun and sun, and my Spanish is never going to be good. So maybe
Yes.
something else.
Yes, yeah, I definitely work with people who are in retirement and it's just not, they're feeling like it's just not quite where they thought it would be. Or like you're saying that, yeah, I enjoyed it and now I'm ready for the next thing, but what is that next thing? And
Mhm.
so I think the key here is really not being so attached to a vision. Because allowing it to unfold and allowing ourselves to continue to look at the possibilities
Mhm.
and pivot when needed. When we worked through COVID, for so many people, they were so attached to their plans that
Mhm.
then it was like, wow, everything's ended here. And for those that had this growth mindset and this perspective on possibilities that I really infuse in my conversations with my clients, they were able to look at, well, how do I still take this time that's precious that
Mhm.
we never know if we're going to have more of it or not?
Right.
And how can I make the most of it? And so I think it's just a matter that so many people don't do the planning beyond the finances.
Mhm.
That honeymoon phase can wear off generally 6 months to 2 years after retirement. You were
Mhm.
mentioning some that lasted a little bit longer, and it's for each individual. But
Mhm.
if we don't have some of that foundation, and if we don't have the things that I share with people to go back to, what are your values? What feels purposeful to you? What constitutes that sense of identity?
Mhm.
Moving through transitions, all of those and more, those are the components I speak to, then we're kind of on quicksand. And
Yeah.
so it's understandable that all of a sudden people are going, oh my goodness, this isn't what it was cracked up to be. Well, I think because they didn't really have that vision and that plan.
I really love the work you're doing here. I'm reflecting on as we get older, and I'm older myself. I mentioned to you that what prompted building a life design was my son's asking me the question, so what will you be doing in your retirement? And I'm like, I plan to never retire. I love what I'm doing. Why would I quit doing it? And he said, well, you might want to add some other things in that I never thought about adding in, travel and other things, like maybe going to see him in what tropical foreign country he's in now. And so we built this platform to design our lives, for me to include how I might want to design my retirement. But I know that couples can make a plan. They're going to sell the home in New Hampshire and live where the kids are in a tax-free state, whatever that looks like. And they decide 2 years in or some period of time, not so much. This is really not for us. We really miss our place. We miss the changing of the leaves in the snow, even though it's not practical and they don't want to come visit in the snow. We liked it. So, do you ever recommend a half step? It's like, well, if you sell the house in New Hampshire, do you buy a condo and then go try your other spot and go back and forth a little bit? Because I know, like in business coaching, executive coaching that I do, I always think when you enter something, you don't cross that threshold until you have an exit strategy. Like I'm getting in, let me think through how I get out
Mhm.
before I get in. It's like it just in case I don't like it, or I liked it fine until this thing changed in that
Yes,
industry. I don't like it so much anymore, but I've thought through an exit strategy. So as people are exploring new things, do you help them say, and if you arrive at a place where your spouse has passed away and you don't want to live in this foreign country by yourself now, or you now want to be closer to family and family's here, what does an exit strategy look like? Because we are planning our final chapters, if you will. We know that there will be a time when we might need help or assistance. I guess it's on my mind because my mother just entered an assisted living facility and we had
mine
to
is.
find one where she could take her dog. I mean, it's like, I just need to bring the dog. Whatever else is fine. I need to bring the dog. So,
Yeah.
what kind of planning in this, if this thing happens or this thing happens? So there's a pre-thinking of a pivot or an exit strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's as we go in life, it's always good to have our plan Bs and plan Cs in the
Mhm,
back of our mind. What comes up for me are a couple of things. One is not being so tightly attached.
yeah.
So, we made this decision to move to New Hampshire, let's say,
Mhm,
and we did it based on certain criteria or certain expectations. Did
mhm,
we think those through to begin with? So were they what I call realistically optimistic or
mhm,
were they really idealistic? So let's get real about it.
mhm,
And then also just recognizing that if things do change, we have this perspective that, okay, we did that, we experienced it.
mhm,
Now what? But I don't think that we have to go in with knowing that it might go south. I think
mhm,
it's more that mindset that if it does go in a different direction than we planned, that we have been communicative about things, that we have really shared our expectations and not made assumptions.
mhm,
Because we touched upon couples and couples navigating retirement, that can be fraught with danger for many.
mhm.
The rise of divorces in the older adult population is
It's a
definitely
real
there, and
thing.
so
Mhm,
it is real. And oftentimes, this comes for a number of reasons. It comes from not communicating with one another, but
mhm.
even more than that, not having our own vision of what that retirement's going to look like so
Yeah.
that we haven't then shared it with our significant other.
Mhm,
Also, research tells us that men and women in general, and this is just generalities,
mhm,
come at retirement with very different approaches. Men look at it as a time of rest and relaxation, and women come in as a time of rejuvenation or reimagination. And so, or reimagining. And so, right there, then we see that there's a potential gap. And
mhm,
so, it's really critically important that we have those conversations. One of my clients was really finding this to be paramount because her husband had retired before she, and then when she retired, there was a lot of friction. And through the course of our conversations, it came up that she was really managing him. She had taken all of those processes that she was in a high powered position and she brought it all to the home. And so she was like watching what he was doing and focusing on that so very much.
mhm,
That was a non-starter, that was really so.
mhm,
So I do work with couples. We go through also an assessment where that really elicits that communication and conversation so that we can gain our own clarity. We can share it with our companion. We
mhm,
can figure out where do we go down the path together? What do we do individually? And
mhm.
that will enjoy and bring it back to the relationship and make it even more dynamic. So very, very important. But yeah, I don't focus so much on what you shared with the exit strategy, although I appreciate that. Because I think that we're not really looking at that end, we're not holding to a goal
Mhm,
or an end
mhm.
spot. We
More
have
of
a
the
vision.
flow.
And then
Yeah.
we're allowing it to unfold and we're allowing ourselves that, okay, I tried this and yeah, it didn't rock my world. So I'm going to try something else. And I'm the CEO of me and I get to
Well,
decide.
to celebrate the freedom. of being able to make new choices. And,
Yeah.
as we wrap up here, I so appreciate your time. I'm reflecting on maybe it's just in our cultural zeitgeist that we get to a certain age and we think now we stop growing and we stop learning and we stop changing. And no,
Travesty.
we keep growing, we keep learning, we keep changing. If we want to feel like we're thriving, like we're enjoying things,
Yes. Yeah.
change and learning and growth are components of that. Whatever age you are, whatever circumstance in life, to embrace that I'm going to grow and learn and change when I turn 70, when I turn 80. And
Yes.
some of the things that you give up, your arthritis won't let you do the needlepoint anymore, or your knees or your hips won't let you play as much golf as you used to. That part of that growing and that change is those adaptations to still find joy, to still find things that are interesting and give
Yes.
you that feeling of, as you say, purpose. So,
Yeah, and I think too, in your sharing that, it's not only gratifying and fulfilling for us,
mhm,
but impact that we have on those we love.
mhm,
We model that growth. We model that openness and experimentation and willingness to fail, because it's really learning. And
mhm,
then we also impact our communities because we're giving of ourselves. And
mhm,
then if we broaden it to making an impact in our world. And that might sound like Pollyanna, but it's really true.
mhm,
If we stop growing, if we don't allow ourselves to step into everything that's possible for ourselves, then
mhm.
we're really not just denying it for ourselves, but denying it for all of those that we touch. So really, really an important and unique and incredible opportunity for all of us.
Well, for those that are watching, and I really again appreciate your time. If you have parents that are in retirement, but maybe they don't seem to feel especially fulfilled or inspired about how they're spending their time,
Yeah.
or they're approaching a time of retirement, going through a workbook, having a conversation with you is just so helpful to say, well, let's just recast the possibilities. What kinds of things could we think of together that maybe you haven't thought of yourself? And I love the idea of that kind of Venn diagram crossover of, what does your spouse want? What do your children want? What are their expectations? And then as CEO of yourself, what are your expectations and just getting that realignment going,
Yeah.
before the day you stop reporting to work. So
Yes, yeah, very beautifully said. I love that. And I think we're very aligned in life design for people and that idea of creating a retirement of your design, not default.
it's so fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to tell everybody I know all
Yeah,
about you. And so
right.
we'll share your workbook link. And then do you have a link of how to get a hold of you, or is the best thing your website URL? How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the name of my company is Conflux Retirement Coaching. That's CONFLUX. And so you can find me, connect with me through confluxretirementcoaching.com or email me at Wendy at confluxretirementcoaching.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and would love to connect, and you'll find
Okay.
me at Wendy.
Well,
Wendy.
yeah, I'll share your LinkedIn there too, because we
Yeah.
know all our hardworking billion people who connect on LinkedIn, So that's a wonderful audience for you. Well, thank you so much again for your time in this enlightening discussion. I'm very grateful.
Oh, I'm grateful for all your great questions and your anecdotes as well. So thank you so much. It was a
Right.
pleasure.
We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.